support them wherever required, and then also upgrade them, and wherever the uh, uh, application, the development organization released latest bug fixes or application upgrades, they needed to be deployed by the customer himself. Whereas in the case of cloud applications, this is not the case anymore. Obviously, the service provider, the software service provider, uh, will take care of all these activities. They will deploy the application in their own data centers. They will offer access to this application generally through the internet as just a web URL. For example, like google.com or yahoo.com. This would be a standard URL that is handed over to the customer, and the customer does not need to do all these activities that we're talking about. I'm sorry, I think the PowerPoint presentation has not switched to the next page. Just give me a minute.
Yeah, title slide only is there, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why it. Just give me a minute. So I think what is happening is this presentation has been uploaded. So maybe to save on time, if you could, all of you, switch to the slides yourselves. I think it allows you to switch to your slides yourself.
Yes, sir.
Can you please check?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
doing it.
Yeah, I think everyone needs to do that. I'm sorry for this inconvenience. Somehow Cisco WebEx is a little new for me. I don't know if that is the case, or it is because I use a MacBook. But please switch to slide number 3, where I was talking about already.
Sir,
Okay.
1 second. If I go to slide 3, will it be visible to all the other participants or only to me?
No, it is visible only to you specifically. So all the participants need to switch to slide number 3.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
It's okay,
Where do we look into that? Sir,
I'm sorry?
left hand side. One bar is there.
Yeah, left hand side there's one bar. You could switch there.
Panel left hand side. Okay.
Did all of you get that?
Yeah, left hand side, when the up and down symbol is there, we can just click on the down arrow, it goes to next slide. All of you.
I don't know. Okay. So I'm in slide number 4 as of now. Please go to slide number 4.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So yeah, I was talking about what is a cloud application. So basically, in the past, when customers had to have on-premise hardware and infrastructure, they needed to maintain the application and support it on their own. But with cloud applications, this is no longer the case. The service provider will take care of, basically doing all these activities for the customer. The customer does not really need to worry about investing in data centers, capex, also investing in human resources, and so on. Yeah, so that is the idea. Um, it is very easy for the customer to just access this uh, application via the internet through a standard URL that is given to him, and then he is able to just go through his daily work on that URL, right? So just to mention, we are not talking about hyperscalers like Google, GCP, or Amazon Web Services, or Microsoft Azure, and so on. These are infrastructure as a service providers, which means they provide hardware and compute plus infrastructure equipment like network and so on, uh, where ideally software as a service applications would be hosted on, and they sit on this layer of infrastructure as a service in some cases. So we are not talking about those. We are talking just about software as a service applications. Please switch to slide number 5. Yeah, so now we will go into the activities section of the presentation. So what are the main activities of software as a service, uh, cloud operations unit? That is what I would want to touch upon here. Uh, Essentially, see, any cloud operations unit which is operating such a software as a service application would be performing four main activities, right? So one of them is monitoring the system landscape. The second is to provision application access for new and existing customers. The third is to basically deploy software changes wherever required. And the fourth is compliance. We will need to align our activities to standard processes, which can then be audited by external auditors and so on. So these are the four main activities. Although we use these terminologies here in our presentation, they could be addressed by different terminologies in different organizations. Uh, there's some crosstalk, I suppose. Can you please go on mute?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so they can be addressed by different terminologies in different organizations, but we are just going to use these for simplicity. Yeah? And these are the terminologies that are also used in my experience as of now. So I will continue to use these terminologies. Okay, so just to get into some more details about monitoring, what do we do during our monitoring activities? We, like I explained earlier, we monitor the health of the customer landscape, the customer systems, and so on. The first thing is to monitor, and the first most important thing to monitor is the availability of the application, access to the application, obviously. And this is achieved through synthetic monitors like Pingdom, Catchpoint, and all that. So what essentially these third-party applications do is to ping the URLs from external internet locations located around the world. For example, if there's a URL, if there's a system which is hosted out of India, the URL of that system would be pinged by these locations across Europe, America, Japan, Australia, and so on, just to determine whether the published application is accessible across the world. It would alert us in case there is any unavailability from any single location. And yeah, I mean, there are some filters and so on, obviously, because yeah, I mean, if a URL is unavailable for 1 minute or 2 minutes, that would really not be an unavailability alert. It would just be a blip. But if it is consistently unavailable for, let's say, more than 5 or 10 minutes, then there is something actually going wrong on some infrastructure component or on the application itself. Yeah, so then it will need to be investigated. Where is the issue, and where do we need to troubleshoot? That is the first point that we have to monitor, because availability is tied to our contractual SLAs with our customers, and generally availability commitments are very high in the ranges of 99.5 and above, 99.5% and above. Okay. The second thing to monitor, obviously, is the thresholds on the systems themselves. Memory, page files, and application errors, dumps. Basically, these thresholds are configured in a way to throw alerts to our monitoring consoles in case these specific thresholds are exceeded. For example, memory utilization more than 80% or 90%, page files getting full, application errors, dumps in those applications, and so on. Yeah, so these are typically achieved through health checks and dashboards. So the health checks are configured in a way they are actually set up as agents on the systems themselves, which would then basically throw these alerts directly to a console if there is something wrong happening. Hmm? So the third main important topic is to monitor performance, because yeah, I mean, slow performance is mostly equal to unavailability in most cases. The application generally does not even help the customer to use at all. Yeah, so that way performance is an important component to monitor. And yeah, this is also monitored using health checks. There are specific tools like Dynatrace which help in customer experience monitoring and so on. So it generates customer tries to generate or mimic the customer experience when there's a performance issue, and it helps to show where exactly is the performance issue coming, which screen, for example, or which module of an application that is actually performing slowly. So that helps in pinpointing the performance issue, where it is actually happening, and which component is causing this bottleneck. Yeah, finally, last, but it is really not the least, one of the most important points to monitor is security as well. We need to be careful that our systems are not subject to attacks, they are not vulnerable, and so on. So all of this needs to be monitored, and if there are vulnerabilities which get discovered on an ongoing basis, they need to be fixed, again based on priorities and which part of the internet they lie on. For example, there could be a vulnerability which is generated, which is really affecting a firewall, but that same vulnerability, if it exists in an internal system, it is really not a big problem, because yeah, I mean, it is internal to the firewall, right? So the same vulnerability on the firewall is far more severe compared to it being on an internal system. So obviously the priority would be to fix the firewall and then later on fix it on the internal system, right? So then obviously all of these monitoring would generate a lot of data, would generate a lot of alerts and so on. It would really become difficult to monitor them individually, right? So then there are some consolidated dashboards that are created to correlate all of these alerts coming from various sources, even individually and together, to help us in quick analysis and resolution. And obviously all of these alerts and health checks, like I explained earlier, they are classified according to severity and impact. And the severity and impact is nothing that we interpret on our own. It is essentially to how does it impact the customer is what is important, rather than we creating our own interpretations of the severity and impact. Okay, let's go on to slide number 8, uh, please. Yeah, all of you, I'll just give you a second to switch. um, okay. Okay, so sir, you're changing yourself, is it? Then I really do not have to bother. Okay,
I am
so
changing, but I don't know how the others are doing.
okay, so at least I am doing it on my own, but I'll also be telling everyone on which slide I am on
Yeah.
actually, so
Okay.
you can continue there, right?
Okay.
So yeah, the second main bucket in cloud operations is provisioning. I explained this. So we need to provide access to the application to our customers, and basically this is called provisioning in SAP, and probably a few other organizations as well. So right at the time when a new customer signs a contract, he needs to get access to the application, the whatever business application that he requires, that he signed up for, right? So that needs to be provisioned for the customer. It is not an automatic thing. It will need to be provisioned, meaning to say there probably needs to be a URL specific to the customer which needs to be generated and then handed over to him along with the credentials of the business user and so on. And that needs to be sent to the right end user essentially. Yeah, so this needs to be achieved using standard provisioning procedures, and progressively this should be ideally automated, because then it will first of all help to reduce human error and also help to speed up the provisioning of access. Typically, provisioning of application access to a customer after the customer has signed a contract would take anywhere between half an hour in very fast cases. We have seen this within SAP itself, that some of our own applications are being able to be provisioned within a half hour. Some do need anywhere between 2 to 4 hours to get provisioned and so on. So all of this is, it depends on the level of automation, the level of maturity in that specific LOB in terms of cloud operations. Yeah, so that is about provisioning, but then the reverse process is equally important. The decommissioning, once the customer's contract expires, for example, uh, generally cloud contracts are signed off for 1 year, right? And when we are talking about specifically small medium enterprises, there is a lot of churn. These customers probably might switch to different cloud applications altogether. There are possibilities that these customers go bankrupt altogether and so on, right? So in those cases, contracts generally expire at the end of 1 year and they are renewed according to the need of the customer. So if they are expired and they're not renewed, then we will need to decommission the customer's data, the customer's access to the application, and also the customer data that is stored in our servers at that point in time, so that as part of our data protection and legal requirements as well, we are able to fulfill those requirements. Essentially, we are not allowed to keep customer data within our data centers after a customer's contract has expired. And also to ensure that we are able to reuse capacity that has been consumed to deliver the application access to that customer, right? So that will also help to recover that capacity in terms of infrastructure, whatever infrastructure that we are using to deliver that access to the customer, right? Now I'm on slide number 9 now, software change. And this is the third most important bucket of cloud operations. Basically, this is to deliver software changes in terms of bug fixes or release upgrades to the customers. And bug fixes are generally identified via internal tests or customer tickets. They are released periodically by application development teams. And release upgrades are essentially new features that are released to the application, and they need to be deployed to the productive landscape. So depending on the architecture of the application, uh, these bug fixes and release upgrades might be online, in the sense that there is no downtime for the customer. In some other cases, there might be possibilities that we require downtime during these deployments. So this needs to be managed, and this needs to be managed as one part of the contract. And when it is part of the contract that we have planned downtime available to us, these activities need to be done during planned downtimes. Obviously, they cannot be done during any time, because then that would cause a downtime for the customer. It needs to be done during planned downtimes in case downtimes are required. Obviously, the process is as important as the technical delivery itself. We need to be thorough in testing all these software changes, because that should not actually, in the name of fixing bugs, it should not introduce newer bugs, right? So that is something that we need to take care of. We need to take care of dependencies to previous packages and so on. That also needs to be ensured before we are able to deploy. Yeah. So in this case as well, just like provisioning, these processes that we have need to be progressively automated to make these procedures of deployment error-free and reliable, and also to ensure scalability of deployment across. If we have this landscape sitting across various data centers in the world, then we need to ensure that this deployment happens at the same time, so that the productive landscape has a uniform release level. Yeah. So, for example, if we are on a current release which is released in June, uh, the entire productive landscape should be on release June, and not some part of it on release April and some part of it on release February and so on. This will ensure that we have uniformity of access for the customer in terms of the application he's accessing. And also, this also helps in terms of supporting that application, because for sure we are, we know that any issue that the customer is reporting is on a very specific and a single release, right? So that is very, very important. Yeah. I'm switching to slide number 10, which is on compliance. Sir, can you change to slide number 10? I think your desktop is shared across everyone's. Shiva Reddy, sir.
Ready, sir?
Slide number 10, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, if for others it is not reflecting, please change to slide number 10 yourselves. I am on the compliance slide, and yeah, this is the last, but not the least, in terms of the important activities that we perform as part of cloud operations for a software solution. And in this case, so there are various standards that we need to comply with. For example, the ISO standard, the System and Organization Control SOC standard, C5, which is somewhat equivalent to SOC, but applicable in Europe, and some industry-specific operating standards like GXP for pharma and so on, wherever applicable, right? So there are these specific industry standards that are requirements for industries like pharma, which have very high level of data protection and security requirements. So these kind of compliance requirements are required to be, these activities are required on an ongoing basis, typically annually or biannually, right? And this is required because this eliminates the need for customers to have their own audits. Customers who are again business organizations will be subject to financial audits, will be subject to system audits as well, right? And when they go and tell their external auditors that we consume a software as a solution called, let's say, an ERP solution on the cloud, then the auditor will demand to ask for certificates from the service provider. So we will need to provide the ISO and SOC certificates as service providers ourselves. For example, SAP provides those certificates for all the cloud applications that we offer to our customers, right? So what does this require? This requires, so we talked about monitoring, provisioning, and so on, right? So these are all the standard activities that are performed, and we need to showcase, or we need to demonstrate to our external auditors that we perform all these activities with a set process in a standard way, and which is complying with all these standards that I referred to earlier. And we also need to provide evidence of such processing. For example, if you take monitoring, and we tell the auditors that we monitor our application on a 24/7 basis, they will demand to see such evidence. For example, They will demand to see a sample of health checks. They need demand to see whether these health checks have been resolved by, let's say, somebody sitting and checking those health checks, or even by automated, fixing of scripting of those fixes by themselves. Yeah. So all of this needs to be demonstrated as evidence. For example, if you take decommissioning, so we need to show that within a month of the customer's contract expiring, we have decommissioned their access to their system and also deleted their data. All of this needs to be demonstrated to auditors, and only then they will provide these certifications that are also then published and available for customers then to also show to their auditors that we have compliance there as well. Yeah. So that is the activity around compliance, and generally this happens on a biannual or annual basis depending on which standard we are talking about. Typically SOC standards are audited twice a year, ISO once a year, and so on. Yeah. Yeah. So having covered all of the major activities, let's probably talk about the challenges. Yeah. So in cloud operations, I think I am in good time. So let's go to slide number 12, which describes the challenges. So the challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis are all related to the activities that I talked about earlier, right? So manual activities obviously lead to error at some point in time. So we need to progressively automate. So that will help in reducing human error. That will also help in reducing, let's say, the requirement of people in cloud operations, and hence also reduces cost. Proactive action is always better than reactive, and that is where our monitoring is the best example. For example, in our experience, we have seen that we are able to fix 95 to 96% of the issues before the customers see them and before the customers experience them, right? But then these issues obviously do not cause an impact to the customer, so the customers really do not know about it. But if the customers make a complaint, and that after that we react, and that is where reactive procedures come into the picture. That is where customer satisfaction gets impacted. That is where availability might get impacted. That is where then all these discussions about the contract availability and penalties, all of that comes into the picture. Yeah, so that is where it's a challenge to always have a proactive mode of operating rather than a reactive mode. Although we are at such a high level of proactive mode of operations, even in SAP, we still have end up having a significant number of customer escalations, because yeah, some of the proactive monitoring that we've set up does not always work. Maybe it's a human error in some cases where our people who are actually monitoring these on a 24/7 basis, they miss these alerts and so on. Yeah, so this is where automation comes into the picture. And as far as possible, even with monitoring, we should be able to fix these errors coming from any alerts with self-healing mechanisms and so on. Yeah, so that is one part. I also talked about provisioning and deployment, software change deployments as well. As far as we are able to automate, the better we are in providing the customer the experience with respect to these activities. So the sooner we are able to provide access to the customer after contract sign off, the better it is, because then the customer is reassured that he gets access to his application, first of all. And the sooner we are able to deploy hot software changes, bugs get eliminated from those systems. And if we are able to manage it without downtimes, it's again a better experience for the customer. And yeah, all of this is achieved using automation in some other way. Yeah, so it can be software automations, it can be scripting, and anything for that matter. The second significant challenge that we face is the total cost of operations. Obviously, money matters. At the end of the day, money is what matters to everyone, be it the customer or the service provider. For the service provider, revenue minus cost is what he makes as money, right? So obviously the cost needs to be minimized, and the cost of operations directly impacts the profitability of the software as a service. Um, Basically, total cost of operations has some 3 or 4 components, out of which cloud operations contributes the significant cost, right? So I can talk about the components here. Application operations, the team that runs the customer landscape. Obviously, the people that are employed there, they are a cost to the whole application. Obviously, that is there. Infrastructure costs, the compute equipment, the network, the data center, and the power that goes into maintaining those data centers, the uptime, and all of that. That is a cost of the total cost of component of the cost of operations. And then finally, cost of software maintenance, right? So cost of some software maintenance is not belonging to cost of operations, but then it is something which directly is a function of the quality of development that goes into the software, right? So it also, wherever there are bugs, obviously there need to be bug fixes, and this is what is software maintenance. And if there are more bug fixes, obviously there's a cost to that, fixing those bugs, because then a significant amount of development time is occupied in fixing those bugs rather than developing new software or new releases, for the customer, right? So that is how it's a cost of TCO, or total cost of operations. And it directly is like I said, impact to the profitability, because it is directly subtracted from the revenue that comes in via customer licensing and so on. So and in this part, efficient capacity management, in terms of projecting what is the capacity that we'll need, let's say in the future, 1 month from now, 1 quarter from now, 1 year from now. Are we very accurately predicting that capacity that is required, uh, um, and also at the same time not buying up excess capacity, which will then again lie unutilized. All of that is very, very important to manage, without which we will be escalating the TCO. So in terms of people, and I put this in the last, but then again, not the least, cloud operations is not a visible unit, right? So whenever everything is working well, people really do not see this team actually functioning. Only when things go wrong, or whenever there are escalations, or whenever there are downtimes, that is when cloud operations becomes visible. And that is not positive visibility, that is always negative visibility. So obviously this whenever given that visibility is always negative, it is not always easy to showcase our achievements, right? So compared to, let's say, for example, an application development team which would deliver newer future features, that would be very easy to showcase, but it is not easy to showcase on cloud operations side. That's a challenge. And it means that the people who work in cloud operations need to be sufficiently motivated to perform this, because they don't get the visibility that they always deserve. So improvement initiatives are not always tangible, because yeah, I mean, if say for example we reduce capacity somehow, we are able to reduce capacity in terms of running an application, that would reduce the TCO, but it would not be visible to the customer. Okay, so the the very important thing here is to have 24/7 operations. We need 24/7 staffing. And yeah, I mean, obviously all of you are aware that whenever there is a 24/7 involved, night shifts, weekends, holidays that come into the picture, and people are not willing to work in these graveyard shifts in the weekends and so on. So that's a challenge as well. Although the situation has improved, we are generally a downstream activity to application development, and whenever there are new projects or initiatives, we generally face the brunt of tight deadlines, poor code, etc. So this is being improved on an ongoing basis, because development and operations are becoming more and more closely knit. It is no longer called cloud operations independently. Now it is always called DevOps. You would have heard of this fancy term now, but even then, there are still some situations where we face these kind of downstream pressures from the organization, from our senior management, and all of that. So these are the challenges that we face, and yeah, I mean, on an ongoing basis, we need to address this. So this is not a one-time effort or anything. This is always ongoing. Yeah, so I think I've reached the end of my presentation, and yeah, I'm open to take any questions.
Santosh sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is Prashant. I have a simple question. I'm not basically into this computers and all. I'm with electronics background, not so much into this, but still I have a question. Earlier days we used to purchase the software and put it on the server and clients were using it, right, sir?
Yes, yes,
We were
that's right.
purchasing it. We were purchasing by
Yes.
putting so much of money. Okay, so after the introduction of this cloud technology and all, so I think if I am right, every one of us
I'm
directly
sorry, sir.
access by paying smaller amount of money. Am I right, sir?
So, sir, it is not necessarily smaller amounts of money, but like I said, it has some advantages from the earlier days where we used to purchase and install software on our own,
Yes, sir.
and then maintain the systems and the servers on our own, having data centers, corresponding expenditures on data centers and all of that. That is not required anymore in certain cases. Yeah, it is not, again, not applicable for every customer in all cases, but in certain cases and certain specific lines of business applications, this can be made possible.
So what is the financial implication on the proprietor or service provider between earlier version where we were purchasing and installing on the server and the present cloud technology?
Sure. So the financial implication is very simple. There is no capital expenditure. I think I mentioned this in one of my slides. There is no capital expenditure involved for the customer. So the customer does not need to purchase the servers, does not need to purchase the software license. So that is one advantage, obviously. And also, like I said, the customer does not need to maintain an IT staff to support this data center systems and so on. That's another advantage or a cost saving for the customer. And finally, the customer does not need to, install or monitor whatever activities that we are performing. And I described these activities. These are completely taken over by the service provider rather than by which was traditionally previously performed by the customer himself. So all of this result in significant cost savings over time. Although it is probably not necessary that you see it at the time that the contract is signed off.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Sir, I think that's all. So nobody is
Okay.
having that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Prashant sir, can you sum up?
Yeah, I'll do it, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Today, the 26th June 2021, the program titled Cloud Operations, Applications and Challenges. It was organized by IEEE Education Society Bangalore section. The chair of the society is Dr. Venkat Siva Reddy, secretary is Bharati, and today's speaker is Santosh Chachadi. It gives me immense pleasure to thank all the members involved in making this program to happen. First and foremostly, Shri Santosh Chachadi is a resource person for delivering the talk on cloud applications, which included a brief and lucid explanation on the applications like monitoring, provisioning, software change, compliance, and then challenges like activities, total cost of the operation, and so on. So we really understood a lot about this cloud applications and challenges, sir. So I'm very much thankful to you on behalf of IEEE Education Society Bangalore section, on behalf of the chair, the secretary, and all the office bearers of IEEE Education Society. Thank you very much, sir. And I am very much, I am very much thankful to Dr. Venkat Siva Reddy, Bharati Madam. They are the respectively the chairman and the secretary of the society. And I am very much thankful to Siva Yellampalli sir for participating and talking to us at the beginning. I am very much thankful to all the members from SRM institutions. And I am very much thankful to all the office bearers like Bharati Gururaj, Vishwanath, Bindu, and all the members and the participants who are involved directly and indirectly in making this event to happen. Thank you, one and all. Over to you, Venkat Siva Reddy, sir.
Thank you, sir, for the vote of thanks. And I would like to thank Mr. Santosh Chachadi for sparing his time to give this talk on cloud operations overview and challenges. Thank you, sir, so much. We would like to come back to you probably after a quarter of time with a new topic on these aspects. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll close the session for the day.
Yes, sir.
Shiva, Dr. Shiva? Dr. Shiva? Shiva, yeah, anything to say?
Sir?
Yeah, you have anything to say, Shiva?
No, sir. Only thank you very much, sir, for taking time and participating, sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.